to be cute but subtle, wondrously meaningful, witty and fine. I want to be loved for it. I want to be loved. Watch me yet you can't see. What am I doing? What am I doing? You watch me carefully. You take my hand. I'm glad I'm there. I work hard sometimes. Mostly I work to keep busy. You run yourself silly. When you come home from work, you are tired, you drag. I watch you, you see me. I hear what you say. You love me, you're angry. I don't understand you at all. I am trying to come up with something. I attempt to be cute but subtle. Wondrously meaningful, witty and fine. I want to be loved for it. I want to be loved. I want to be loved. I want to be loved. You watch me yet you can't see what I am doing. What am I doing? You watch me carefully. You take my hand.
All right. So, welcome to Radio Arcane, the podcast number 19. Here with one of the pioneers of minimal synth music, John Bender. I'm Brian Drabant.
I'm Motuvius Rex.
I'm Star Vomit.
And I'm me.
John
You're you.
Bender.
Well, thanks for taking the time to do this with us today, John. I guess we can kind of maybe start with maybe the sort of origins of, you know, how this your musical work sort of started. Maybe going back to sort of the origin of your first record and your label Record Sluts, which I guess was sort of a vehicle to self-release your music, as far as I understand. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it was, let's see, actually Tom Strohmeyer, who is an artist in Cincinnati, and I just brought his name up a month ago, and I was going to see if he's still around, but he, he said it once, record slats, and it just stuck in my head. Things like that stick in my head. Yeah, so I've always really been into music, just as a listener, and played drums, and actually had a drum set up for a while in my early 20s, and my neighbors hated me. And and at that point, I lived in a house, and my brother and I shared the house, and then he got married, and he basically bought me out, and I was living in an apartment at the time, and let's see, when was that? That was like in 77. And I was kind of underemployed for a while, and I finally got a job which didn't pay well, but it was a factory that made roof deck, and I became production and traffic manager. Well, the first thing I did as soon as I got some money is I went over to Swallens and bought a ARP 2600. Wow. And I started playing it, and ARP 2600. By the way, it's in the basement. I'm afraid to turn it on or it'll blow up. But and I can't wait till I was pissed I missed the initial Korg re-release, but I understand they're putting out another one that's considerably less capacity. But anyway, so I just sit there, and I was in a basement apartment with basically 2 rooms and a kitchen, and the one room was big enough for my mat and a bookcase or a bookshelf, and I stick that thing on there and just listen to it all night long. So it went from there. I got an ARP sequencer, and there was a store in Cincinnati on Calhoun Street. I think it's probably right where, if you feel familiar with Cincinnati, where Moles is, or next door to Moles.
Sure, absolutely.
Electronic music store. And this guy worked, he was at CCM. I think he was a adjunct or something like that, but he opened up this store, and they didn't have a lot there. They maybe had a dozen or so different synths. And one they had there was EML 400, which is a big box. It looks like a big suitcase.
Oh yeah, the Electrocomp, like the 400 and the 401, which has like the sequencer in it as well, right?
Amazing machine. And I've looked for something that resembles it now. A bit wandering in the tuning, but I loved it. It's so flexible, and there's so many things you can do with it. And you can also take a pattern, and just by hitting one of the buttons underneath it, you can stop everything to loop back. Like I could loop it at 16, at 4, and actually it could take it all the way to 32 if I wanted. But it was very concrete, and I interchanged that and hooked that up between the ARP, and that's how I did it. And meanwhile, I was listening to a bunch of music, and which you got that tape on some of that early stuff, right?
Yeah, for sure, yeah. And you had some really interesting influences, obviously. Velvet Underground was one, and Soft Machine, as well as some other influences, and that kind of leads me back to my next question, which is sort of a rewind a little bit. But what was what made you decide? I mean, I know from what I had read, and maybe you had even told me at one point, the ARP 2600, you had to take a loan out for that. So I guess my question to you is, what was like the sort of idea in your mind? What made you? That? What's that?
Do a stupid thing like that? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you were influenced, by some bands that obviously that were probably maybe not so heavily electronic, although there's others, I think, that from my memory, Can and Faust and some krautrock stuff that were influencing you. But what made you decide to take that leap to spend all that money on getting that ARP 2600 initially, to sort of
start? Well, first, yeah, first and foremost, I'm really bad with money. So that explains that part of it. But, I developed in the early 70s when I moved over to the house. Right across the street from me was a guy by the name of Jack Gorski, and we were both into some of the same stuff, like the second Procol Harum. We liked a lot of the Donovan stuff. There was that whole pre-jazz fusion thing going on that Donovan and a couple other folks like that you wouldn't think of as, but they were really seminal in coming up with various kinds of music. So anyway, Jack and I, so I'd go over to his place and we'd sit around and listen to music and kept buying records and listening. And at that point, now it's a deluge. You turn on the internet and there's anything you want. Whereas back then you had to keep your ear to the rails and see what was coming up. And
sure,
I wasn't a very big reader. So I made a point of hooking up with a bunch of people like Bernd Beierschmidt down at Kids Books. And in the basement, he sold import records. And so I'd be down there and spend most of my, whatever my spendable money was, what I'd do is he'd get records in and I'd set them aside. And then when the beginning of the month, because I got paid once a month, I'd go in and buy out the ones that I'd held. And so that got me going. Well, Jack also, Jack's a guitarist, and we started a little kind of party band called Barbie and Ken. I played drums and sang, and he played guitar and sang. And then he got himself a TIAC, what was it, 3340, the 4-track.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And that blew me away. And then he moved off to Switzerland. Actually, he moved off to Glasgow. And he's doing his postdoc there. And so I went out and bought a 3340. And that's where that early stuff, like the stuff that's at, I think Vinyl on Demand put it on a little single. They put it on something. They put it on. It was on one of the discs in the box set.
Okay.
But it was very muffled, and wasn't really impressed with it. Then when I got and that was actually before I got the 2600. But Jack also taught me a lot about. I mean, I'm a third grade piano player, so I knew about scales and all that. But he taught me stuff about modes, and we were both really into the kind of doodlings that Wyatt did with whole step and what's the other one? There's a whole step, half step scales and how that plays up. And so, I got into composition that way, and he bought himself a cheap little organ at the time. And then when he left, he gave it to me, but I'd be over at his place doodling around on the organ. So that kind of got me going. And then after he left, and I moved out of that place, I moved over to the Roanoke, and there I was sitting around, and this is also pre-ARP 2600. The first song, I had my headphones onto, I think, Heart of Darkness, Perubu's Heart of Darkness, to do the drum track, so I could have something
Nice.
All along with beat. And then I added on to that. I'm not big into that kind of recording. I think I've made that really plain. I don't like stage recordings. I also don't like to tweak a lot with my recordings. But so I started with that, and then once I got the 2600, it kind of fell into that. Another one is I got a Yamaha cassette player, and that was a whole lot easier to manipulate. It was, and it actually sounded better than the 3340. And like I said, I didn't do overtracking at that point, so it wasn't important. I just push the button. I do my setups and play around with it, then push the button, the record button, and I pick up a set of lyrics and just start singing on to it. Well, obviously there's a lot of garbage there. I think I ended up having like 54 tapes, which Steve Waskovich has right now. I gave them all to him so they could make when they redid the when he put out the records with Superior Viaduct. That's what some of the stuff he got off of that. Let's see, where are we? So, I started doing that stuff, and I kept throwing these things around to people with cassettes. I'd run into a friend and I'd say, hey, listen to this. And I run into another friend, hey, listen to this. But, when you're doing it with friends, A, you can never quite tell whether they like it or not. B, I don't know about you, but it usually takes me 3 or 4 listenings to something before I can figure if I like it or not. Very few things I just immediately like. And interestingly enough, a lot of those I get sick of within 2 weeks. But the ones that it takes me a long time to like, I keep liking them forever. And that's So then that's when I decided to do the record, because that's also at the same time that a lot of DIY was coming out. So
Sure.
it makes sense. And a lot of it's just that all of a sudden you had relatively portable technology where you could do home recordings.
And you, I mean, a lot of your process, from what I understand, is, I mean, you mentioned you made 54 tapes or whatever. A lot of it was everything. As far as I know, your process being is just kind of a one shot on all this stuff. You just kind of you do it, it comes out, and that's it. I mean, is that right?
Right. Yeah. Well, like in the case of what's the one? The one that's on the first side or both sides. The first song on both sides of, I don't remember now. That's an example of where I did use the same lyrics on, with two different setups.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Sure.
So that's an example of how that would kind of morph. So there's a lot of things where there's false starts, or just stuff that's, from my perspective, is garbage.
And a lot of the names of your tracks, if I'm not mistaken, are basically, the name of the tape, as in you had 36 tapes or whatever, and then maybe the second track on side A or B. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
So if it's 36A2, it means it's a second track on the A side of the 36 cassette.
Got it.
And that
Do you ever have? Oh, go ahead.
No.
Do you ever have people come up to you and be like, "Oh, I love that 36A5 track"? Or
No, that's why everybody, all the remakes, they wanted me to put names on them, which I'm always that's always tough for me. I mean, later on I can come up with something, but immediately I'm kind of blank because that's not the way my compositions. Like, I don't do a song about a tree or my lost love or that. So
Sure.
no girls' names on them and things like that.
Back to gear for a second. Another synthesizer I think that you mentioned to me that you also had was, I don't think you have anymore, but was a Korg PS3100. Is that right?
Yes, and I for this since it turned me into a hoarder because I'm afraid to let go of anything.
Yeah.
That was an amazing, very limited. I mean, there's only one voice, but it just had the most amazing processing, and it was just incredible.
Yeah, it looked like, I mean, from I've listened to a little bit on YouTube of that synth, and it also looks like it had quite a bit of modulation options as far as a ton of knobs and whatnot. So
Heavy as fuck, man. It's
yeah.
Excuse my French.
No, you're totally okay with any of that French here. So
We've got potty mouths. It's all good.
it's all fucking good. So. So you did your first few records. I guess your first record was in 1979. Is that right?
1980.
1980. I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay.
I don't remember now. So
Yeah.
And
either. So
what's that?
And I don't want to talk about it either. I said, you don't.
Right. Exactly. And then after that you had Plaster Falling, followed by Pop Surgery, which are your three records, and then you did also some cassette releases after that into the early and mid 80s.
Well, I was actually mixed in with it because I was involved. There was an organization in town called Cincinnati Art Group Effort, and my next door neighbor Peter Huttinger was involved in that, and he kind of got me involved in it. And they'd have these showings, and every time they'd have a showing, I would just get the cheapest tape I could find. I mean, this stuff was like the stuff that you did, the secretaries would use, or the companies would use, and they'd give them to their secretaries, and they'd type out the letter and stuff. But and I'd sell them with various kinds of packaging and stuff. Yeah, I did some fun things. Once I got an Eternal tape, and had a portable cassette player, and stuck it in the roof of the ceiling of the elevator, and so it just played this loop the whole time as people went up and down. That was fun.
That's awesome. So to your second album, Plaster Falling, that album you actually created sort of for at least for the first release,
First
like
100 records.
first
Yeah.
100, it's like a sort of like a plaster actual sort of covering on that. Can you talk about that and like what the process was?
Well, for one thing, record stores hated them. And so did, and new music was my distributor, or my major distributor. And new music is like Carla Bley and Michael Mantler and, the Jazz Composers Orchestra. So I was like really honored that I was part of that whole plan. But they let me know that they didn't like them either, because once somebody pulled the string on it, it had a little red string on it that was taped, so the opening was taped down with the little thing. So you'd have to pull the string to open it up. And they hated that because if somebody returned it, it was useless to them. They couldn't resell it. Anyway, so what's my point? Well, that was actually Vicky Mansour, and Vicky Mansour is responsible for the label on that one too. But she came up with the idea of using half drywall mud and Elmer's glue.
Interesting. Okay.
And then we just dipped them and literally hung them up to dry.
Oh wow.
So that's why they have different flow patterns on them. If you get 3 or 4 of them in a row, none of them are the same, because they have a different texture to them.
Yeah, sure. It's really cool.
I have the second pressing right here, but totally.
Oh yeah, the one that's it's sealed in latex for your protection.
Yeah. But I've seen various different versions of these online too, just on eBay and stuff. Like that looks slightly different, but you can tell it's actually hand painted or spray painted or something.
Spray painted. I made that the plaster falling logo with cardboard. I cut out the so it was like a negative cut, so that you lay it on and spray it. And I also found the reason there are different colors is I just find the cheapest paint I could at a hardware store. If they were, if they had a mismatch, or somebody returned the can and they were selling it at half price, that's what I would use. So I just did a roller, and then again I put the tape on it and the string, and then roll it, and then spray paint the label on it. The hand stamp on that one was really tough, because it's actually it was so big that they had to curve it, because in order to get it, you had to be able to do this to it, because if you tried to stamp it, it wouldn't come down right.
Okay.
Is that on the back what you're talking about?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's all one stamp, and it's
Okay. Yeah.
Back to record sluts for a minute, and I feel like you can elaborate on this more, but you had mentioned your friend from the bookstore earlier. Do I have this right, that he had recorded the Velvet Underground in 1966 as a live show, and then you actually released that on Record Sluts? Is that correct?
He did, but he did it. We did it under Record Sluts just for.
Okay. And what was how did that all transpire, and was there any sort of fallout with Velvet Underground after that was released?
No, actually, and in fact, they used a section of that apparently on their box set.
No shit.
Yeah, no, and I think Suzanne, which was his significant other, still has the original tapes for that.
Wow, no kidding. Do you have, speaking of original tapes, are there any other tapes that you have floating around of still unreleased things that you just kind of have,
Yeah,
around?
Waskovich at Superior Viaduct, when I gave them all the tapes, they went through and they made a whole nother bunch of, they made I think an album's worth of stuff off of that. That he's never released. I mean, he's been releasing. Are you familiar with the Superior Viaduct? Their album is incredible. I mean,
yeah.
The stuff. I mean, Alice Coltrane. I can't think of anybody else, but the Fall. which I'm not big on.
Yeah.
People like them. Yeah. So that's there. And then I think they used one of them. There's a, what's the name of them? They're in Scotland. Factory, not Factory Records, but it's something, it's got factory in it. There's another, I think, an adjective to it. But anyway, they've done two things about me. One is they have a group there called Kubler-Ross who put out, I think, 36A2. And, but they also were putting out a compilation, and Steve gave them, with my permission, one of my songs off the other, which I've never heard because they gave it to me in vinyl, and I asked them for MP3, and I haven't had a record player set up for 30 years. So
Looks like it's Vinyl Factory is a label.
that's it.
Yeah, but they did that So Low compilation, which is really good. A lot of awesome bands on that one that came out a couple years ago.
Yeah, I think that's it.
So one of the last things that you did before you took, your hiatus for, several decades was this Johnny Vortex project, which was, I guess, sort of performance art with two other people that were in the band, and then
Jason Tannen, photographer, and he would show slides. It was a glorified slideshow, and then Kate Gallion did performance art, and like some of it was bondage stuff, some of it was just gory stuff, but she'd do all these strange things. And we did this show together. That was a lot of fun. Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Heavens and she's an angel. She's a perfect angel. You know what I really love about her, he said? She doesn't think too much. She's real quiet, and she has a great sense of humor. I wasn't sure who I felt worse for, her, or him, or me. I had been cut loose. Her nightmare was just beginning, but he had to live with himself. Well, there is one thing I can do about this, I thought. So I went to the closet. Abduction. I reached for his gun. Took 3 steps into the room, and I shot him. Betrayal. He looked surprised. What's the matter? I said. Darkness, I can't take a joke. And he smiled. Could have been a good man if someone had shot him at the end of his life. Smile. The time in the loving. It's magic.
I never saw this guy before. I couldn't describe him. His hands got so bloody, I could rule the world. Begged me, but I wouldn't stop. The funny thing is, don't travel where he travels. I'd never seen him before. He changed my life. I changed his. I didn't see what it looked like, but I could draw you a picture.
never knew what I was capable of before. Place my ring on the bedside and think of you.
One of my favorite things is off that. Again, I can't tell you what the name of it is, but it's got street stuff going on in it, and it's got it's just this whole weird amalgam. It's the closest thing. It's one of those things. It's kind of like the Replacements. You always think they're ready to fall apart, but it somehow all fits together. You know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you ever saw the Replacements live, but they were like that live.
I'd never heard of it before, but like Brian told me about it the other day, so I looked it up online and listened to a few tracks. But some of it almost reminded me of a John Waters type movie or something, you know, or just or like some sort of 70s exploitation. I mean, some of it was pretty humorous, but
yeah. And Tannen was really into film noir, so all of his stuff has that. All of his visuals have that kind of dark, musky quality about it.
Yeah, or even like some sort of like Ed Wood type drama from the, you know, just
yeah.
So, what I mean, to give me an idea of, or to give us an idea of you know, your process, back to your process. What's sort of the, you know, idea behind some of the lyrics for your music?
Well, I described that to some degree, or articulated to some degree with. On the Superior Viaduct re-releases, but it really is, it kind of shifted early on. That job I had as a production and traffic manager, I had to run inventory every month. One of our owners was an accountant, and it drove me crazy, but I have to run, but outside of that, outside of getting out, I had to get, you know, orders out every day, getting shipping and receive shipping, but outside of that, I had a lot of time. And so I would just sit there and write down lyrics. And then and the lyrics, well, like 3 of the songs on the first album were written by, you know, Jack Gorski. Actually, there's 2 sets of lyrics, and 1 song or 2 songs uses the same lyrics. But trying to think, the other ones, to think about that for a second. Yeah, I don't have on the first album, I don't quite have a feel for that as much as on the second album. There was I did a lot of, based it on images of films. I used to, I basically lived at somewhere between the Esquire and the Alpha 6, which was down in Northside. It was a theater house too. And at that point you could get in for $2 and it was no big deal. So I spent a lot of time in theaters and was really into some foreign films and odd films. But I based them a lot on that, and I know why. It was because of my marriage. I couldn't write about relationships at that point, or else it would be scrutinized. It's like, what does this mean? Who are you writing about here? You know, that kind of, and I just didn't want to go there.
Sure.
And it wasn't anything that she said. It was just in the back of my head. I felt like I was being scrutinized. So I just took it one step out. Whereas Pop Surgery was more a function. It got to a place where I was just juxtaposing words and concepts together. It's much more surreal than the other 2. And I think the first one probably was involved in relationships, but in a very kind of abstracted way, you know.
Do you have an art background besides, I know you make art with music and such, but like education wise, I know you're like a therapist.
That's part of a bad name. Just kidding. No, outside of my interest in it, I've always, there's a picture. My father was a musician, and me more so than my brother or my sister, pushed me into music. And I don't know that he pushed me into music, but he realized that I liked it. And there's a picture of me somewhere, I've been trying to find it lately, where I'm like, I must be all of like 2.5 or 3 years old. And I'm, I've got my hand on the needle arm of a record player, a little old toy record player, and I'm playing something. He used to bring in stuff all the time. So I've always had that kind of aural fixation. I mean, it's 5 years old, 10 years old. For one thing, I moved around a lot because I grew up in the military, and that was just a constant for me. It was always there, and it was always consistent and something I could depend on.
And you moved around a lot internationally. You were born in Germany, correct?
Right. Yeah. Yep. I was the second Nuremberg trial.
Wow. Yeah.
It's just a lot of what you were doing. I'm about 20 years behind you in age, but like my generation was doing a lot of that kind of things too. You were doing it before, but it has a very art school, do it yourself.
Yeah.
All of that kind of thing. That's why I was just curious if you had any. The
DIY was going on there. Like, I love swell maps. I mean, I take swell maps over fall any day of the week. That whole, recording in your bathroom kind of thing was just, it was going on at the time. And for me, it wasn't the bathroom, it was just my bedroom.
Sure.
And that's something that I think like a lot of people are home recording now because it's easier, but it doesn't have, there's something about the equipment, I guess, that you were using 40 years ago, 35 years ago, that people aren't using as much probably. And I think that kind of made it more interesting and feel a little more
interesting. And also, I'm sure the process was way more difficult. You're sequencing within, an actual hardware piece of gear, which obviously lend itself to some amazing tracks, but I can imagine the setup on it. Maybe was somewhat difficult, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, it would take me, I could do maybe 1 or 2 songs a night. And, again, that was because of the setup and finding something that sounded right and, moving plugs around and stuff. I'll tell you.
Were you recording? You obviously are prolific from the amount of tapes you made. Were you recording on almost a daily basis for those years from, 78 to, 85 or so, or 84?
Well, so I think I started that would have been 78, 79. I started, the album came out in 80, but a lot of that material was started in 78. And I basically didn't have a life, outside of, I didn't see a lot of live music. I wasn't hanging out with a bunch of folks. The only thing I really hung out is if I went down to Kids and hung out there, or Burn. Once a week we'd go over to his place at the bottom of Clifton and down by Spring Grove, and there'd be 3 or 4 of us, and we'd play what we just gotten. We'd review, go around and listen to stuff and drink beer and smoke cigarettes.
We have grown so much together.
trace the smile of your face when you shut me down, baby. Still, I want to leave you. No matter what you say, I got to leave you. No matter what you say, I got to leave you.
Sounds nice.
That was fun. It was fun while it lasted. So, yeah, it was like most days I would put out something for that while. But that's kind of my pattern. I get really intensely into something, and then one day it just, the thrill is gone, and I walk away from it. And that's kind of what happened.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. I mean, you walked away in the mid to late 80s completely. You just kind of cut it off. What kind of happened with that?
Well, one of them, I went back to school and got my MSW, and that was out of necessity. Where I worked, and it's more complicated than this. I think there's some reasons why me and my boss didn't quite get along, but his family basically took over the business when I was promised, at one point, general manager and partial ownership and all that. And I saw the day his 19-year-old daughter reamed me a new one in front of him, and he agreed with her, when the thing that I decided, the decision I had made at the time was a decision he had instructed me to make as a basic policy. And so when that happened, I realized, oh, there ain't nothing going on here. We're going to get squeezed here. So I just I needed to find something, and I got into mental health, and that was fun. Which, if you had told me 10 years before that, I told you you're full of shit. I never would. And in fact, the girlfriend that I was with at the time when I did the early TX stuff she was a therapist, and I swore I'd never do that.
Well, it's probably a little bit more of a steady income than life as an underground musician too.
Absolutely. Well, that's a whole nother. At the time, I got a couple reviews, but I didn't have it. That whole reputation thing really started in the aughts, in the new millennium. It was like, and I forget his name now, but he was in Belgium, and he started a blog on me. And
is it the guy who runs
Stalte?
Valhalla Records in Belgium?
Yeah, Valhalla, yeah.
So and right now he's a techie, and he now lives in Greece. At least the last I heard. I don't know. He might be.
It's not him then. Like I first heard about you probably around like 2004, just seeing your records on eBay because I was collecting synth records. I'd mostly been buying goth and post-punk stuff in the 80s, but I started moving into experimenting more with like synthesizer stuff and especially the minimal synth stuff. And I just kept seeing, would see your records pop up for like $200 and, people be like, this is a masterpiece. So eventually I was able to track some stuff down, and hear it. But that's how I found out about you.
And that, the internet, again, it's like, it's all there, and but by the way, there was a couple other ones I think of when you talk about minimal synth. Robert Rental was, I really liked his stuff. Going back to some of this stuff, I realized, I totally forgotten about that person. Charisma, which I think I introduced to you, Brian.
Mm-hmm.
You stayed with you that one night. That stuff was there, and it interestingly enough, it has everything to do with technology. It has to do with the technology you have at the time.
Mass communication. Available. Yeah. I lived in Cincinnati actually in the early 90s, and that was about the time that most people were transitioning from vinyl and cassette to CDs. Mm-hmm. So they were just dumping off all their records and tapes, and that's how I learned about music back then, was just go in and buy a stack of music that I didn't even know who the artists were half the time. Right. And now you can go on YouTube and hear anything.
Yeah. Yeah. It was when I did a show, an interview thing like this for WAIF, several years ago. And I forget who it was, but one of the guys there had picked up Pop Surgery for like, I think it was $5 or something, that was before the re-releases is going on. So yeah, things like that happen. And, it's like all those, because of the internet, I think because I used to watch it with, when my albums would come up, and I also realized that there were a couple European boots that were going on out there, which pissed me off.
Yeah. Seems to be happening more and more. I see that with, I don't know if you're familiar with the band Coil, but probably one of the most bootlegged artists I can think of. People just getting, various maybe digital files of albums that either haven't been released or maybe haven't had a re-release in forever, and just, making vinyl on it without any, correspondence with the artist, which is just so fucked up, but
Yeah, that's the way it works. And what was my point? There was a point about that. But anyway, I'd watch what was going on, see when my albums came up. And I don't remember now, the highest I saw was $450.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Although I wonder if that's probably come down in price a little bit since the Superior Viaduct releases. But
now they're somewhere around $150, $200, and they don't, whether they sell or not is a crapshoot.
Right.
Did Frank from Vinyl on Demand hunt you down initially?
Yeah, that was funny. I was at the office. I do a lot of my sessions on weekends because I don't do evenings, and I got this phone call there, and I picked it up, and it was Frank, and I said, "I'll tell you what, call me back at such and such a time," and he talked, and I just said, "Sure, why not?" Which, other people had written me, and I just never got back to him. But he, by calling me and talking to me, that's really made the difference, I think.
Yeah, he does all kinds. I mean, he hunts down. I think he has a pretty amazing cassette collection from the 80s, as far as just weird industrial and.
Yeah, he's a fetishist when it comes to cassettes, and that's where it started.
Yeah. Shane English, also, if either of you are familiar with him, he also has a pretty large, really obscure cassette collection, a lot of Eastern European stuff. But yeah. So another question for you. You had a hiatus for a very long period of time, obviously until 2016 when you did the No Response Festival. What was what got you back into doing that? I mean, what was the what was the whole thing?
Well, some of it was circumstance in the aughts, the mid aughts, like 2005, 2006. Well, one of the things that was a turnoff for me is when synthesizers went digital. they would go to, and I still own a Rhodes Chroma.
Nice.
Go ahead.
I said I was just saying, oh, nice. It's a great synth.
It's busted, but I know I could send it off, and that's another monster of a machine. But
Yeah, no doubt.
I didn't like, and I've never liked that single screen, and you have to scroll through to get to anything.
Yeah. Menu diving central, right?
Just do not relate well to that. Part of it's my ADD that I have things. If it's in front of me, I can see it. And
yeah, same.
My favorite companies right now is Electron, and they've been putting out a series lately it only has 2 layers to it, which is great because some Electron stuff goes deep.
Yeah. Some of the Octrack stuff and some of the earlier things, yeah, for sure. But I have seen some. I mean, I actually just picked up a Model Samples, which is actually one of the most intuitive, and least expensive pieces they make, but it's great.
I'll tell you what else is good. Is Arturia's Microfreak. That Microfreak.
Yeah, I have one too. Amazing.
And have you done the updates on it?
I didn't do the most recent update that happened a few days ago, but I did do the update about a month ago, which has the vocoder in it.
Yeah. And now they're selling the separately the microphone if you're interested. But
which is nice because I just bought some sort of lapel mic, but that's good to know that they're finally selling it separately because I know they released that as a like with a vocoder package, is like a white one, but
yeah,
I'll have to pick that up.
So at any rate, that's the whole return to analog started happening back then, and I started watching it, and I was buying a bunch of stuff, but which I still don't use, like the SH-101, Roland, and what was the other one? M Audio put out a couple things, but I never could quite. The other thing that at that point, which was daunting to me, and I basically rejected, was the whole DAW thing. It's just too damn deep. I just don't have patience for it. I mean, I have, what is it? What's Apple's?
Logic.
Yeah.
Oh, Logic.
And I just don't use it. The only thing I use it for is occasionally to record something, but that's about it. So there's this whole.
Yeah, from what I remember and being over at your place, and you have obviously a ton of modular, and it seems like everything that you're working with is all modular sequencing. Or I know you had purchased that GRP sequencer as well. I mean, so you're really pretty much out of the box as far as any sequencing through a DAW whatsoever. It's all through hardware sequencing. Is that right?
Yeah. I don't have any patience for the other. It's interesting because paradoxically, my desert island instrument right now would be the Octatrack. And I have 2 of them. I have the old version and the new version. And I would take those anywhere and do anything because they're so deep. But it took me, how long? How old is the Octatrack? And I got it pretty early on. It took
4, 5, 6 years, something like that.
I think longer than that.
Yeah, that's a deep instrument.
It takes forever. And the difference now is, when I was in my 20s and 30s, I could go through a manual or go through something and I put it down for a week and I could pick it back up right where I left. Whereas now, if I drop it for a week, I got to start all over again. It's like nothing. I don't retain stuff at all. It have to get it to the place of muscle memory to really hold on to it. So anyway, back to the point of how I got back into it. I started buying that stuff and got a lot of it sitting around, which is like I bought a rething of the MS-20, which, it's fun. I like it. It's the closest thing I've ever seen to the 2600.
And those things are great, and they have a great filter.
Yeah, and then I got into modular. Actually, that's later on. I got into the Electron stuff, and then I just started doing stuff and putting out I did a couple things that were on GarageBand, and those were fun, but they were really it wasn't didn't ring my bell a whole lot.
Maybe harder to get sort of the unique sounds out of GarageBand. I mean, if you're doing it entirely in GarageBand, I feel like there's sort of a limit to the sort of weird sounds you can get out of it.
Right. And I kept trying to figure out where's my voice, what's my voice, which I still haven't figured out. I haven't gotten to that place. And the problem is I think in 2019, I kind of lost interest. I lost my drive. So you're going to see a lot of stuff coming out between 16 and 18, and then it just kind of drops off. And I have some things, but I just never put them out there. I just that whole thing is no longer interests me at this moment. I'm still buying equipment. I got a couple of them here. One of the things I really like is the Subharmonicon. And it's one of those.
Oh, yeah.
It's an amazing piece. We use the term intuitive. It's intuitive, but it's also, I could see where trying to work it into a piece, I'd almost have to make that the backbone of the piece and then work off of it, because it's not an easily managed. It's really unpredictable, particularly in the way the sequence.
Yeah, that has a really kind of unique sequencer in it, right? I mean, from the videos I've seen.
Fascinating too. You get stuff out of it how did I get there? There's a piece I have that's a modular piece that's kind of like that too. It's almost works on algorithms and you get your so it kind of has a magical feel to it.
Get up. 1, 7, 5. Move them. Move them deep in line. Get up and dance, get up and dance, get up and dance, get up and dance.
I have a nephew by divorce, Josh Thomas, who works for high-end mixing studio equipment. And he's demoed and he sold stuff to like RZA and Yoko Ono.
Oh, wow.
And
oh, wow.
It's a funny story about RZA. He says, and I can it's funny to me because I can relate to it. It says he's trying to show RZA how this mixer works, and RZA just totally dismisses him and starts turning knobs. he just what's this? You know, and just getting, you know, he just had absolutely no way. You can't tell me, you can't teach me. I got to do, and I can very much relate to that when it comes to machines. It's just paying attention.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of harkens back to an anecdote about David Bowie. I think it may have been on Scary Monsters, and talking about Ashes to Ashes, and saying that, you know, they had gotten some synthesizers and they just fucking threw away the manual. It's sort of, you know, not so much read but do, and I feel like I have, you know, I feel that myself. You know, it's sort of easier to sort of learn when you just fucking get into it. You know.
Yeah. Ashes to Ashes is one of my favorite Bowie songs. Just absolutely just same. Yeah. And my latest acquisition is this. It's NDLR. It's a sequencer, and it operates on much the same way. Where it let's see, where are we here? Oh, and another one is the Typhon, the Dreadbox Typhon.
Yeah. Wow.
But the Typhon is also amazing. I don't know. It's this little machine. Let's see if you can see this. Sorry about this, but there's the Typhon. This little machine. It's really
I have seen that.
It's quite amazing. Now the one that is the
Dreadbox makes great stuff.
What's that?
I've watched some videos on Dreadbox.
I said Dreadbox makes some great stuff.
Yeah, they make some really cool stuff.
There's another one I got recently. I'm trying to think what it is. This is probably the closest thing lately that I've gotten that is.
Oh man, is that Erica? Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just it's the most analogish type thing that you know, kind of old school analog that I've come in contact with. But it's a lot of fun. So
and that has sort of a grid modulation matrix on it, but it's like a digital grid modulation matrix on it. That thing looks amazing.
Yeah, there's one part of it I still haven't figured out, but it's a lot of fun. And but it is because I haven't accessed the memory, whatever memory it has, so everything is starting from scratch. But it's a lot of fun. Anyway, back to reality. So back to the story. So John Rich, and Lorenz. So John Rich wrote me this handwritten, you know, in pen letter and said he'd like me to do this thing. And I remember getting the letter in early February, and I stuck it in my back pocket and walked around with it for about a month. And then finally I called him and said, yeah, I'll do that. And the funny story is he thought somebody was pranking him. It was funny.
So it was that easy. It was like he just reached out to you and you're like, fuck it, I'm gonna do it.
Yeah, right. Well, I had to think about it. Could I do it? Could I pull it off? And I did okay. I mean, it wasn't the show I wanted.
I was there. I think it was amazing. I mean,
really? Okay.
Personally speaking, but yeah.
I felt sorry for, and I can't think of her name right now, but I've gotten to know her a little bit. Came right after me, and she's this like really accomplished musician who does like avant-garde stuff, and she's from. She's from Canada. At any rate, I really envy. What's the island? Vancouver. She's in Vancouver, and she also
great city.
Yeah, I felt sorry for her, but anyway, it was fun. A hell of a lot easier to move my shit. Go ahead.
Oh no, you go ahead, Smurf.
It was a hell of a lot easier to move my, to travel with my equipment and set it up then than it was back when I played before Nico did. That was a nightmare. It was an absolute nightmare.
Oh right, yeah. That's another great question to ask. So one of I think the last live shows you played is you opened up for Nico in Cincinnati at Bogart's. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, I only did a couple live things, and they were always like that because it's just such a. You almost had to have a moving van. At the time, I had a minivan, and it literally filled up the back of my minivan. And the problem was playing at Bogart's. It was on a Sunday, and I kept trying to find out when can I get in. So I took all my stuff over there at noon and basically hung out, and they didn't open the doors for me till about 7:00. So I had like an hour to set up, and it just was.
Oh, geez.
It was a disaster on that level. Now, what it taught me was to work with what you got. You know, I wished if I had to play that one over, I'd have just said, fuck it, and I'm just going to make, do squeaks and squawks for 45 minutes and just enjoy it.
Right.
Because I had this pre-planned, thing that I was going to do, and because it didn't happen, I said, fuck it, I'm done. After about 50.
Was that whole thing, you being able to get on the bill for Nico, did that have any connection at all to you releasing the live?
No,
not at all.
Gosh, and I can't remember his name right now. Guy in Cincinnati I met him through Moles, and he worked at Moles forever. And then when Moles left, or when Moles sold, he went on and set up something else, his own record store type setting. But he was really into that kind of promotional stuff. He was real tight with the Mekons. But he came to me once and says, "Hey, Nico's playing. You want to play in front of her?" And I think somehow there was some sort of relationship, I don't know, in terms of style of music or whatever.
Sure. Sure.
So that's how that happened. Yeah. And then once I did that thing at No Response, then Dennis Tiefus contacted me from Belgium and said, "Hey, so would you like to come over here and play in Belgium?" And I said, "Sure." And he said, "Okay." And then he found out at that point the flights were really expensive. And he says, "Well, I can't do it, but let me see what I can do." So he got me a gig at Cafe Otto, and a really elegant setting in Rotterdam. Quite amazing. I mean, I would move to Rotterdam, or what's the city? It's the secondary city in Belgium. It's not. I wasn't impressed with the main city, whatever.
Brussels.
Brussels. I wasn't impressed with that, but the one he was in.
Antwerp, maybe. Yeah.
And actually, the really elegant place was this. It was like this old castle, not a castle. Just a really elegant setting. Kind of like, it doesn't matter. Just this gorgeous place. It was this big room with fireplaces on either side, and I started at one side, and they had two other performances going on. So they did one and went to the other and went to the other. And the mix guy, because he had something else going on, some dance thing going on by the time I played, he said, "So here's a mixer." And, there's a big deal about the trouble I had in the difficulty I had with the Nico show. And this interviewer from Belgium, I think it was Dutch, interviewed me and was asking me about my history and did a similar interview. And I talked about the difficulties I had then. And so then I get to my performance, and the guy had given me this mixer, and it wasn't turned on right. And so I'm sitting there playing with my machines thinking, what's going on here? It's not working the way I want it to. And after about 10 minutes, finally I figured out it was the mixer. And Dennis told me that people in there actually went over and told me, "Do you want to have him turn it off?" Because they were just so uncomfortable with it. which, by the way, was one of the personal from a friend of mine at the time back with Nico. One of the reviews he had, he says, actually, John, it was quite amazing the amount of drama that the whole thing created because of the angst that was going on in the room at the time. And I thought, yeah, that's how that works.
That's right. I mean, I guess the anticipation, and then when you finally got on, I'm sure it was a relief, you know?
Yeah. And the funny thing is, when I played at Cafe Otto, I got into it, and I had forgotten to go to the bathroom, so I just left my machines on and went to the bathroom. Which reminds me of a story about the Velvet Underground. So a friend of mine, another of my primary influences in music was David Bass, who's actually now is a jazz pianist out in the West Coast. He goes by Dave Bass at this point. But at any rate, so we went to see the Velvets over there in Vine Street, and between Calhoun and McMillan, right at Vine Street. It's up on a hill, and it's no longer there. They basically scraped it. Point being, so we go there to see them, and we get there late at the end of the first setting. And I'm looking, and I said, I don't see Lou. And so afterwards, in the break, we go over and we're talking to Sterling, and he says, "Oh, he just left. He went home." And oh, wow, what was going on? So, and one of the things about it was they had this really tall bass player. I mean, the guy was like 6'6", 6'8", and then when they came back out and started playing again, the bass player was obviously impaired and eventually just laid down on the stage, and they played around him and over him. And it turned out that was Willie Loco Alexander. I don't know if you know who he is, but you guys know who Willie Alexander is?
I don't think I do.
Check him out, man. He does an incredible version of You've Lost That Loving Feeling.
Okay.
He did a great song of his own called Kerouac. What's another one? Just a really, really good. He was at that time he was Willie Loco Alexander and his Boom Boom Band. They were incredible.
No shit.
Yeah.
I'm assuming with most of the shows you did in the early 80s, were they all pretty much improv, or were you trying to actually recreate some of the songs on the records?
I could probably count that I think of it. I did two shows.
Okay.
And one of them was down at down on Lynn Street. I had some people there, and I had like three other people playing, and the problem is we dropped acid right beforehand. So
that can always be a problem. So,
because of course,
been there.
I mean, who wouldn't?
I've definitely done some performance stuff DJing wise on acid, but it's not optimal. I'll just say that. So.
Were you familiar with any other bands in the Ohio region too, as well, like around the same time? I know of a couple like Dementia Precox from Dayton that were kind of synth punk, and like I guess Post-Industrial Noise from Columbus, Ohio in the early 80s.
Oh yeah. Medical.
I need to mention Precox and
there was a band called Perfect Jewish Couple, and they're more mid 80s, but they're a little bit more synth pop, but analog based.
Yeah, they were closer to somehow I relate them to the Mekons and that whole crew. David Lewis. He had a label called Hospital Records, and they had a bunch of little offshoots
Hospital,
of different groups. I think there were 3 or 4 of them. That was going on at the time. I honestly, and this is going on now. When I'm playing, well, it wasn't so much true back then, but ever since then, whenever I'm really into playing, I don't listen to music. I just don't. That's not.
You think it sort of colors your sort of, the way that you work in a way. So you kind of want to have just doing everything yourself, I guess, to a degree.
No, it colors what I'm interested in. You know, when I'm with that, I'm listening to, God, that's amazing what they're doing there. I'm just not, I am not that technically accomplished. So a lot of what I hear, I can't do. And a lot of what is probably unique to my music is that it was created, and I understand it has judgment, and I have a certain aesthetic, and there's a certain, and a lot of it is being drummer, because, you know, when you play on a set, you have to have 3 or 4 things going at once, and you got to pay attention to all 3 or 4 of them, and you got to be able to, you know, multitask, and that's how my music works. But I don't, you know, I would never try to imitate, you know, a Chuck Berry riff or something like that. That's just not what I'm into. I'm not into recreating or. Now I will take, you know, an aesthetic or a technique like the idea of Velvet Underground dragging a chair across the floor or breaking glass. I mean, that kind of stuff I get, and that's more of a kind of a conceptual idea versus trying to imitate Stairway to Heaven.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's kind of the same way with when I'm listening to music. I listen to music one way and I play music another way. There's not really I'm not good enough that I can, let's put technically accomplished enough where I can go, oh man, that's a great way to do that. I'm going to, you know, so when I do this riff again, I'm going to do that pattern instead of the pattern I've been doing.
Sure, but I think there's something to be said. I mean, I have like zero, you know, technical ability to play keyboards whatsoever, but I also feel like there's something to be said for being able to, you know, set up a whole group of synthesizers and use a sequencer to trigger them. I mean, you know, it's a different sort of talent, I guess, but you know.
Yeah, no, that I can do, but they have to be sequencers I can kind of manage.
Sure.
By the way, one of my favorite sequencers is the, what's it called? The Metropolis?
Oh yeah, that's is that IntelliGel or I think it's IntelliGel.
Hold on. Excuse me. And it's called Mega City. It's not Metropolis.
Oh, Mega City. That's Analog Solutions. Yeah.
That's the closest thing I've seen to the EML in terms of its the way.
That's amazing. I mean, I've never touched it. I think I've seen it, maybe your place, but I've never actually touched it or seen it in action. It sort of has this sort of like a vertical drop down of each sort of line as far as the each individual note being hit on there. It looks like a really intuitive synthesizer or sequencer. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yep. So that's a lot of fun.
Totally. So I mean, I know you said you kind of haven't been doing, you had a bunch of output. I mean, I know I had you play down here a few years ago, and you've obviously done quite a few shows. Mm-hmm. And you said you've sort of backed off a bit now. I mean, musically,
right. Well, I had some bad experiences last year in performances. You know, I would love to go. For instance, I think about cities. I would love to go to and play in Cleveland. I'd love to play in Pittsburgh. You know, and that's kind of the way I think. I don't know very much about the scenes or anything like that, but just to kind of like, because it's kind of being an oddball tourist. But you know, one of the things I keep talking about is there's a half dozen or so pieces that I did back in 2016, which are. There's no lyrics to them, but I really like them a lot. You can go on YouTube and see some of them. In fact, most of them are on YouTube right now. But to put out one or two albums, you know, one is there's a couple long pieces that I thought about putting out as kind of like, you know, extended EP kind of situation.
Sure. And I feel like some of the things that I've heard you do or have seen you do have been not so much more small tracks, but longer pieces, you know, 20, 30 minutes or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. These are somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes, but
okay.
Two pieces like that, or to put out maybe 2 pieces like that, and a couple things that kind of work into the same theme. But haven't gotten around to it, and it's all the more difficult now.
Yeah, with pandemic.
Yeah. Well, it's actually gotten easier because people have started thinking more digitally. Like I'm going to send you my files and all that. One of the things I have to have done here is find somebody that can kind of master them and pump them up, because they're real quiet. They need to really be pumped up a lot and maybe cleaned up a bit.
Trying to think of any other things I can ask. On my notes here of
Knuckles, something like
that
victims
one.
of is it victims of circumstance or what?
And it was one of the first songs I ever wrote, and it's kind of like Louis to me. It's just one of those things that it's just real easy for me to come back to.
John, thank you so much for doing this.
Definitely.
Seriously, I cannot tell you how much we appreciate it.
Yeah, it's an honor.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I love to be worshipped.
Who doesn't? I mean, come on.
Anyway, okay.
Well, have a wonderful afternoon. Good seeing you again, John, and I'm sure we'll talk soon.
All right. Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Cities of the plain, I could have wanted you, but then there were so many places to retire there, to sit back and watch the ladies and faces, to contemplate the quality of our interaction. In the cities of the plain, I could have wanted you, but then there were so many places to return to. Cities of the plain, I could have wanted you, but then there were so many places to retire there, to sit back and watch the ladies and faces, to contemplate the quality of our interaction. Cities of the plain, we could have had the cities of the plain, sweep the floors. I could have wanted you, and yet keep our minds clear. But then there were so many, and watch the smoky dream rise above us to heaven. I could have wanted you, was your weapon, but then there were many places. Reached nobody would come to town there. Yeah, but was he listening? But then there were many places. We'll sit back and watch them label the faces. And to contemplate the quality of our interaction. The quality of our interaction. Keep the mind clear.
Radio Arcane.